A huge welcome to this live session. This is an extra special episode, really. I've been super excited, so excited that I just spilled all of my water down me. So normally I have my stuff together, but at the moment I'm just so excited about this live session with Jack and Kate. Today's session is on Did Mental Health Take Gold at the Olympics? And really, for the first time in my lifetime, I'm not an Olympian myself, so I'm definitely not the most qualified person in this panel to discuss it. But I saw mental health really take a pedestal and draw parity between physical health for the first time ever. Whether it was Simone Biles, whether it was Naomi Osaka leading up to the Olympics, mental health really took gold for me. And I'm really fascinated to hear the insights from Jack, and many of you will know Jack, and also Kate, who took gold at Tokyo 2020-2021. And so for today's session, a huge welcome initially. We'd love this session to be interactive. So first of all, if you could just write in the chat function your name, where you're listening to this at the moment, and there'll also be other features that we can interact with. Please use the Q&A feature as well. And if you've got any questions for Kate or for Jack, please post them. We'll try and get around as many as possible. Now, in terms of who this session's for, as always, it's for you. So please ask as many questions as you've got. I've got loads of questions that hopefully I won't get around some of them because there are going to be so many from you. It might be on anything around workplace health. It might be actually on how Kate prepared for the Olympics and for the 5-year run-in instead of the 4-year that's most traditional within here. So in terms of the speakers today, we've got Jack, and many of you will know Jack. Jack's a double Olympian, 400-meter hurdler, and mental health ambassador, has delivered, is an ambassador for Young Minds Mind, has also supported the government with mental health strategy reform, and he's the head of performance at Champion Health. Jack's going to lead the second half of the session, but the first half is all about Kate, and a huge warm welcome to Kate. Kate won gold at Tokyo 2020-2021 and is a pentathlete, and I can't wait to hear more about the preparations that you did leading up to that, all the way through to how you're celebrating now and what the plans are going forwards. So a huge warm welcome to the both of you. I'm Harry Bliss, CEO and co-founder of Champion Health. I'm just going to be liaising. I'm not an Olympic athlete, just as a caveat there, and I'm very far from it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the insights into the world of athletics and also the pentathlon and how you prepare for your mental health for those areas. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'll be able to see all of the chat comments. So hello from Dundee. We've got Stourbridge as well. I went to a wedding in Stourbridge recently. We've got Lisbon, Leeds, so everywhere. Fantastic. Warrington. So hello to you all. Kate, first of all, we're going to start with you, and myself and Jack are going to ask just a few questions initially. Can you just share what the experience was like at Tokyo? It must have been quite different to that of Rio, the previous Olympics that you were at.
Yeah, hi everyone. And yeah, it was incredible, but completely different to Rio. Rio was kind of, busy, so many people around, big crowds, just kind of organized chaos, I would say. Whereas Tokyo was, well, obviously there was a lot of restrictions in place because of COVID, testing every day, no crowds, very quiet, but both were absolutely amazing experiences. And it was just incredible.
So obviously I went to Rio and know what that felt like, and London as well, being absolutely incredible, being a British athlete. Tokyo is very, very different. Now, the village is quite a big thing. And normally if you're a swimmer and you finish early, you then get 2 weeks of accommodation to let loose in a capital city. So what was the village like this time around, and were there any restrictions in the village?
So when we moved into the village, we kind of went in early of the second week, and it was a bit strange actually, because we went into the holding camp first, which was just outside of Tokyo, and it's just where all the GB athletes go. So that was quite quiet, like you knew it was a safe environment with COVID. So then, and obviously at home we'd been being really careful on things. Then when we went into the village, it was suddenly just loads of people, and it was just a bit nerve-wracking, like everyone in the dining hall, which is just an absolutely massive space. So when we first got in, it was a bit of a shock, just being around that many people again. And obviously we wanted to make sure we were still able to compete and not catch anything. But yeah, when we moved in, the village was really busy still. We were probably in there at peak time. But I would say that was fairly normal to Rio. But towards the end of the week, where everyone had to start leaving after their competition within, I think it was about 24 hours, 48 hours after they competed, they had to leave the village, leave Japan. So by the end, it was really quite quiet, which was a bit strange. But yeah, it was still an amazing experience, and we still got to have a few parties at the end, which was fun.
And you mentioned tonight's the first night that you're really celebrating with your partner, your friends and family, which sounds extremely exciting. In terms of the preparations, you obviously had an extra year, and some people would see that as potentially a positive thing, that you've got more time to prepare. Is that the case? Was it really tricky to be able to mentally prepare yourself for a 5-year lead up, I suppose?
Yeah, there was honestly so many different emotions going on in that year. So when it first happened, it was just massive stress. Like, how are we going to prepare for an Olympics when we can't train? So then when the Olympics was announced that it was going to be delayed, it was kind of a massive relief. That we didn't have to kind of work out all these ways to train at home and still be in peak performance for the Olympics in 2020. So then, once that was announced, I kind of just took the time to really just chill out, didn't really focus on pentathlon, and just completely kind of tried to switch off for a bit, mainly because I'd taken a bit of a break from sport at the end of 2017, just because I was just finding it mentally a bit tough. Just going to the same place every day, doing the same thing. So I think having done that, having had a break there, I kind of knew what I needed to do for lockdown, and knew I could still get back to kind of peak performance. But then I was also a little bit worried because I was slightly older and didn't know whether I would be able to get back to peak fitness. So it was just a whole mix of different things. But I tried to keep fit. I started cycling, which was completely different, and I absolutely loved it. So it's just nice to do something new and kind of switch off from pentathlon for a while.
Do you think sorry, Kate.
No, carry on.
I was going to ask, do you think you would have won an Olympic gold had you not taken that break?
I don't know. Probably not, maybe, because I actually, like, at the beginning of the year, so at the end of 2019 going into 2020, I'd had a few illnesses as well and missed actually quite a big block of training. And then again at 2020, I'd done one competition which was actually okay, but I definitely felt more prepared and kind of more mentally ready for the season, or coming off the end of 2020 into 2021. So yeah, interesting one actually, but I think I was definitely more prepared coming into 2021 than I was going into 2020.
That's absolutely fascinating. And Jack, we're going to get onto you later on in the show. But 2014 is quite if I'm to look back at that time, not too many people were talking about mental health at that time. And to take a break, that must have been quite a bold and a brave move, to be able to do that. Was that the case at the time? Was there any stigma that was attached to that? Did you mention that it was a break for your mental well-being? How was that positioned and taken on board?
So it came off the back of competing at Rio. Like, I think that there was a lot of stress going into the Rio Olympics, and I don't think I was really aware of how stressed I was going into that Olympics. And then I obviously took the time a couple of months off after Rio,
Yeah.
which we normally do at the end of the season anyway. But just came back the next year as normal. And I actually had probably the best season I've ever had that year. But I was finding it really hard. I'd been at Bath for a very long time, and just doing the same thing day in, day out, which again, I do absolutely love training, but I just knew it was taking its toll on me a bit. And I knew if I wanted to get to Tokyo, I just needed to take a bit of time off. So yeah, I just went to speak to my performance director and kind of just explained everything in quite an emotional way, which, yeah, I think he was actually really very understanding, which was really, really very nice actually, because I think I built it up to be a lot more in my head. So when he was really understanding and said to take as much time as I needed, it was actually a massive relief. And I moved to my partner's place in Cardiff just for a change of scenery, and we did a bit of traveling, and then I came back 6 months later, and I just had goals for myself as well. Like I said, that I wanted to have like more of a balance between actually being in the training center and training and then doing other things at home. So I just set goals for myself that I just didn't want to spend my whole day at the training center. So whether that was doing my own run at home and then going in for the sessions that I needed to, and just things like that to try and make it more manageable.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. It's a big part of the awareness piece, right? Is you and I think you'll be very similar to me. When you first start, you think, I've got to do everything 100 miles an hour and as professional as possible, and you kind of lose the human element. And it sounds like the awareness piece was, oh yeah, I'm a human being who also does modern pentathlon, and try to find that. Now I know this is a question that Harry would have asked because he's really keen, but obviously I've got some experience of working alongside you, having trained at Bath at the same time as you. Knew you had a psychologist before. Was that something that has carried on within modern pentathlon, within your own development going into Tokyo, working with a psychologist?
Yep, definitely. So I actually went, and so we have a psychologist that is part of pentathlon, but I actually went outside that and found my own psychologist, just personally because I knew him from outside of sport, and he was a pentathlete himself, and I just felt like I had a much better connection with him than the one I was working with. So yeah, I think it's really important to have a connection and a real partnership with someone that's helping you in that way. And yeah, it was definitely the best thing I've done. And I started working with him, I think just a year before Rio, and then I've been working with him all the way up to Tokyo. I mean, I don't speak to him really regularly, but kind of just check in with him. And I think because I've got such a set kind of plan and things that I use all the time, it's just about, and I feel like I know what I need to do now. It's just about kind of recapping and going over that just occasionally, rather than all the time.
I'm honestly, I feel like I'm back at school, Kate, and this is so just interesting. And you could probably see me scribbling notes down for myself, as I'm sure many of the other listeners are. We've got a couple of questions in, and they kind of overlap within there. One is from Ryan and one's from Leah. So Ryan has asked, I would love to know how important R&R, so I guess that's rest and relaxation, is for you both, considering the importance that we put into the hustle, grind culture that permeates elite sport, business, and even personal development. And Leah mentioned on the same topic of Ryan's question, how are we supposed to know, identify when ourselves or others are crossing the line between being ambitious and go-getting and positive to negatively overworking and in need of a definite break. So yeah, I think there's something that we see regularly is that kind of burnout culture, and working, and some people work on that fine line between? How do you manage that fine line within?
I think I've just learned with experience, and I feel like my career's been quite a long career now, and I think as I've got older as well, I've realised that I've needed more rest, and I've just learned how much I need to do and what I need to do as well, like whether that's more kind of steady runs or steady swims, or less but more intense activities. And I think definitely just experience and kind of just taking on other people's experiences as well helps as well. And just getting support around you. I would say there's definitely you need a lot of rest as well. Sometimes just put your feet up, or just find other things that you absolutely love doing. Like, you don't have to just sit on the sofa and do nothing. You can, I don't know, if you're into walking, go for walks, or read a book, or anything that you love doing aside from your work. I think it's really important, just having something fresh to do.
What does that overtraining, that burnout kind of look for you, Kate, when that seems to be creeping up? How do you kind of react and then have the awareness to
know? So I feel like physically I haven't got to the stage of burnout. I think it was definitely mentally I felt like I was burning out. And for me, it was probably just this build-up of stress inside me, and just it all getting too much. And I feel now I can deal with that, and I know when I'm getting to that stage when I'm starting to not enjoy it as much. And sometimes I will just message my coach and say, I'm not coming in today. I mean, it's quite rare, but I will sometimes say I need a day off. And just go for a walk, kind of reset myself. And I think it's really important to be able to be aware of that. And as long as you're not doing it all the time, I think it's important. Yeah, sometimes you can just say, right, I've had enough. I need a day off.
And that permission's so important. And we talk about a champion in the workplace health sphere of psychological safety and giving people that permission. And just recently, I was probably overworking myself, and the irony of working in workplace health and that being the case. And I recognized that, and I actually just took the next day off. Mm-hmm. And I think that gives permission for other people to do that as well. Of actually just resetting yourself, recalibrating, mm-hmm. recharging, all of those types of terms. And I came back then, and the next month was one of the most productive months I've had. And I think that's crucial for any learning for mm-hmm. anyone. Now, I'm conscious of time, Kate, and you've got loads of other media duties. I've just got one final question within here. And Catherine, I'll ask your question to Jack shortly when we move over to that section. It's on Simone Biles. And Simone Biles, I'm sure everyone's aware of that story. And it made all of the headlines. One of the most decorated Olympians of all time. Someone that is a role model for so many. For her to prioritize her mental health in that instance was quite remarkable. What was the reaction amongst other Olympians? Did that give you the permission to then talk about your mental health and other people, for example? I'm just really curious to hear the reaction from someone that's a gold medal winner, yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I think she must have been really struggling in that time to be able to come forward and say, actually, I'm going to not compete in this event. And yeah, I think that probably was really tough on her as well, to kind of sit back and watch, but also really important that she realized that actually she didn't need to do that. And she did come back and do another event, didn't she? And she actually won a medal from that. So it clearly shows that it was the right thing to do. And I think it was very brave of her to do it as well.
Yeah, it was incredibly brave. And I think it's really raised the conversations to the next level and raised the bar within organisations. Yeah. I'm conscious that we've gone 1 minute over, Kate. So thank you so much for joining. I know how busy you are. A huge congratulations as well. And enjoy tonight, because you fully deserved it. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for having me as well.
So in terms of the second section of the of this live session, we're going to be talking to Jack, and many of you will be aware of Jack and Jack's story. One of the first people, if not the first person in British athletics to openly speak about your mental health, which was incredibly brave. It's a lot easier to do now because of the permission that's been given from people like yourself, Jack. But that is really what a role model is to me. Just before we move on to that, I just want to summarize the notes that I've been making off the back of that. And we're hugely fortunate to have Kate join us. I think that there are around 7 things that I've really taken away from that, Jack, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts around. Taking a break is so important, and investing in rest. That was really a key theme that came through there, that resetting, recalibrating, giving yourself the permission, speaking to your coach, whether that's your line manager, hugely important. They're lessons that we can take into the workplace. The other element was around the importance of supporting others. And she mentioned her performance director being just a human being towards her, not necessarily just focusing on the performance element of the elite sport, but focusing on the human being. And then the rest came. And no wonder that Kate has done so well at not only Rio, but also Tokyo recently. Also, finding a purpose outside of work and outside of Kate's work has been hugely important from what I heard there. Really important to me, and I'm sure it is yourself, Jack, and everyone else within this call, that we're not just focused on one core mission. We're able to have that purpose and meaning outside, and having that support network around you, whether it is a therapist, and finding the right connection with the therapist, hugely important for anyone that is going through therapy or has gone through therapy, as well as having that strong support network inside and outside of work. And really it echoes a lot of the things that we talk about, Jack, in terms of workplace health and psychological safety. So now we're going to flip it around. I'm going to stay on as the host, but Jack's now got the spotlight on him, and I can grill Jack as a friend and as a colleague. I'd love to hear more questions within here, but we're going to just kickstart, Jack. If you can just give a bit of an introduction to your background and the way that you opened up about your mental health in 2013 and the impact that that's had on not just yourself, but the people around you in British athletics as well.
Yeah, so I'm a double Olympian, very fortunate to have represented Great Britain at London and at Rio in the 400 metre hurdles and 4x4. During that time, I obviously struggled with my mental health, which has led me to this position. But I came back from a break from the sport and became a world and European medalist. I was always in the top 10 in the world in my event, yet struggled with mental health. I was diagnosed with depression, bipolar tendencies and anxiety shortly after the London 2012 Olympics, where I finished 4th at the age of 20. Only 2 years before, I was not even top 100 in the world, and it was my dream to go to an Olympics, and I ended up representing Great Britain in front of that 80,000 people in the stadium, something they didn't have in Tokyo, unfortunately. But 80,000 people, 20 years old, finished 4th in the relay, missed a medal by 0.13, so just a little bit. Not that I'm bitter, nearly 10 years on, and I unfortunately fell in the hurdles, part of the game. Hurdles get in the way sometimes, but yeah, I then, as I said, I was shortly after those Olympics, I was diagnosed with mental health conditions and was considered a threat to my own life. And yet I was 20 years old. I was voted the most talented sports person of a generation in Britain, so not just in athletics, most talented athlete in the whole of the country. And yet within 6 months of those Olympic Games, I was at the Priory in Birmingham for some time and really taking steps to try and manage this mental health journey I was on. But yeah, so I went really public. So I struggled for a year, but lots of papers, lots of media, lots of people asking questions about, well, what's happened to this guy who's meant to be the next big thing? He can't finish races anymore, or he doesn't look right, so on and so on. And I'm very honest and open. So I thought the easiest thing to do would be to do a 2-page spread in the Sunday Times saying, I have depression, that's why I'm not running very well, and I'm going to take a break. And that was in 2013. So quite early in the sporting journey, only cricket had really come out with stories around mental health. And yeah, it was naivety that led to me being open and honest and thinking it wouldn't be a problem. So even though I didn't believe in mental health prior to that, hadn't experienced anything around mental health, hadn't experienced the stigma, hadn't happened in my environment. So I just thought, I'll just be honest and open, we'll move forward. And yeah, it's actually something that I say to people. I'm very proud to have done the work that I've done. I'm very fortunate to be in a job with Champion and helping people within mental health and well-being. But actually, I do regret a little bit that announcement that I did, because at the age of 21, it very much put a black mark next to my name within sport. So it's amazing to hear from Kate how Modern Pentathlon were very open around, not that Kate struggled with her mental health in a condition side of things, but they were able to understand stress and pressure and allow her that time. Whereas, yeah, within my sport, that wasn't the option at the time. It was very much damaged goods, see you later. So, yeah, there's lots there for you, Harry. I'm sure you can pick something out of there.
Loads. And thank you. I'd just like to say, first of all, for the bravery. People are still very brave that come forward about their mental health, but the stigma has been eroded somewhat across society across the last 5-10 years. But to be one of the first, if not the first, to go out to the Sunday Times, I can't imagine the impact that that's had on other people that would have been struggling at the time where the stigma was huge. And that just shows the character that you have, Jack, and you know my thoughts on all of that. We've got some absolutely excellent questions, which we're going to come on to in a moment. I guess, hypothetically, if you are now running in the Olympics, would you be as open? You mentioned there's a slight bit of regret there. Has society and has the Olympics, world and British athletics changed with the times, or is there still a stigma attached to mental health and a lot of work that needs to be done?
Sport is quite some way behind, unfortunately. It's obviously much better because sport is almost an extension of society. So as society improves, sport will then follow. But we still have this idea that sports people, they're on that pedestal, they're superheroes, they're almost not human when, let's be honest, the only difference between me and someone else is that I run faster than them. I'm just a human that runs fast. And unfortunately, I didn't run faster than all of the other humans, but I ran faster than most of them. And that led me to where I was. But that didn't change the fact that I'm still a human being. So I'm very fortunate to coach. I had an athlete compete at Tokyo in the 200 meters and the 4x100 meters for Italy. So got an idea around, how Tokyo was for the athletes as well. I think, with people speaking out, it's making a big difference, but we saw the reaction of that. Yeah. It wasn't all positive. It shows how far we still have to go. So despite being someone who's in well-being, in mental health, someone who's incredibly open and pretty much a spokesperson for sport and mental health, would I advise someone speaking out? I wouldn't say publicly. I'd say speak with your team, the people that matter, those that hopefully you can trust and you value at this moment in time. They're the ones that need to know. But going public, I think, adds this whole level of stress that almost counters the ability to be open. It helps other people by myself, others being open and honest, but does it help that individual at that time? I don't think it does, because society isn't ready for that.
And that's such a shame. And you look at, like you say, the backlash with Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles, and we look at our organisations, that we need our organisations to be that safe culture where you don't get the backlash there. And that's really what psychological safety is. And I'll keep banging the drum about that, because it's one of the most important things. Catherine has asked a question. The only thing I'm struggling with is the acronym of NGBs. Do you know what NGBs is, Jack?
Yeah, national governing bodies. So athletics, all the sports governing bodies. Don't worry, I've got you, Harry.
Yeah, well, I've learned a little bit of lingo, so that'll be another thing in my notepad shortly. But Catherine's mentioned, in addition to the support you've received, is there anything else the national governing bodies could be doing to support their athletes generally? Would more openness and media coverage from the NGBs in relation to mental health and wellbeing assist? I guess that ties into your previous point, Jack, that there is still a backlash and there's still a stigma. How far does society need to go? And by when, I guess, because it seems like there's a lot being spoken about. You still get the Piers Morgans that are making inflammatory remarks.
I think the important part of what Catherine brings up there is, what can media and national governing bodies do in assisting with this? So it's not asking an individual to step out there and have to deal with all of this. It's having that team give permission. So it's that permission piece, right? So if you have all of your national governing bodies, and which they have in times, and whether that's standing up to racism, whether that's with mental health, but the more we do that, the more that the governing bodies, the teams, owners, the management give that permission piece, the more free and open that psychological safety, the athletes and support staff as well. Because it's not just athletes, support staff, coaches, medical, whoever it might be. It gives them permission to be able to be out there. So there's a lot they can do in terms of just behaviours and actions. It's no different to workplace wellbeing, when we're asking leadership and management to role model behaviours and actions and give permission. That's no different within a governing body. It's still a business. So if we're able to create that top level permission, that will really help, whether that is internally from those people, but externally as well, because media is such a big part of sport. There's so much more governing bodies could do. And this isn't a dig at all. It's just we are new on this journey, that there's still lots we can do and lots to support. So I've worked with the government around mental health reform and elite sport. Cricket are doing much more positive things than other sports because they're further along on the journey. You look back at who were the first sports people to talk around mental health, and you look at Marcus Trescothick and the cricketers back then. So they're further along. Individual sports are also at a disadvantage because look at athletics. I'm based down in Kent. You've got some in Loughborough, some here, some in America. I lived in America and trained there. So to be able to support lots of individual athletes, individual coaches is really, really hard. Whereas teams are a lot easier because, well, this is my team and they're here and I know what they're doing. I know what's happening. You're able to keep account of that. So there are difficulties and hopefully, as long as that can change in terms of the awareness and the communication first, that mental health is okay, then hopefully we'll get the bigger change and the athletes can feel supported.
I think this is a fascinating thing, Jack, that you've, on one hand, you've been an athlete and a leading athlete. On the other hand, you've been a coach as well. And I'm right in saying that you've coached a world champion as well. Was it in the 200 meters world championships recently?
The world relays, the relay champion. So Italy won the 4x100 and one of my athletes was part of that team.
And I'm sure we've got a lot of managers on in this event at the moment. I suppose there are a lot of parallels between your coaching principles and how line managers can support their team. What's your coaching ethos, having gone through what you've been through as an athlete?
Yeah, you know this one because I preach it from the mountaintop as such in terms of my role as head of performance. And if you're thriving personally, you're more likely to thrive professionally. My athlete PB'd for the first time in 6 years, and she's worked with the best coaches in the world. I'm not one of the best coaches in the world yet. I have a lot of learning to do. But the reason she PB'd was not because I did anything particularly special in terms of on the track. The training isn't that much different. We all do pretty much the same stuff. But the reason why is because I care about her as a person. And I'm trying to make sure she's thriving off of the track so that when she comes to the track, she's ready to go. It's taking away that noise that will then come onto the track and affect performance. That's no different within work and home life. If home's noisy, it will at some point infiltrate your work. So how can we support our people outside of the workplace so that they can come and just focus on what they need to do? That's my one job with my athlete. She goes to Olympic Games. I need her to only think about that. But if I've got everything else going on around her, she's not going to have that focus. She's not going to perform to the best of her ability. So that's a big one for me, is how do I help them thrive personally to thrive professionally? And the whole point of that is understanding that this is a human being and a part of them is being an athlete. But 24/7, they are a human being.
And this is something I'm really conscious of as the CEO of Champion Health. And we've just onboarded our latest team member, Dan. And so a lot of you will be meeting Dan soon. And the pledge that I'll give to every single member of the team is I will do everything that I can do. And so will Ricky, the co-founder of Champion, to assist you in thriving personally and professionally. And I think that's really important to actually get those words out to individuals and for them to be able to hold you as leaders, line managers, accountable in terms of that. I think that's crucial. We've got a question from Scott, which ties into what we were just discussing then, around when you were training and performing at the highest level as professional athletes, do you have low periods once you've gotten back from competing at the Olympics? And if so, how do you manage this? I guess it's all individual, but I've heard it from so many people, Jack, that you win a medal or you go to the Olympics, you experience London 2012, and then the real dips after it. And how do you manage that?
It's brutal. I know it's something our team came up with as a question for Kate, especially being an Olympic gold medalist, and when does that kind of wear off and so on. And I tell you what, an Olympic Games is the most amazing experience an individual can ever have. It's your dream. It was my dream from the age of 7, made an Olympics. Now I finished 4th, London 2012, millions of people watching, everyone's excited about London. At the end of the competition, I got a train home and done. That was it. That's your after your Olympic Games. There's no check-in after that. I had a month off before I went back into training down in Bath. So, it was just, it's like jumping off the cliff, essentially. It's of you're well for a month plus, because you have a holding camp before, so you can acclimatise or you get ready, whatever it might be. So about 6, 7, 8 weeks, all your job is to do well at that Olympics. That's all your focus. You have nothing else. You are fed, you are clothed, because you have to be in the team kit. All you do is train, and then as soon as the games, the kind of the flame goes out, the Olympic flame, you're done. And there's no support. This year was the first time I've seen something as support when you finish the Olympics, where the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, had sent an email out to all the athletes. I got it as well. Don't know why I didn't compete, but I'm pleased to have got it, where they've set up almost an EAP for athletes for after this Olympic Games. They've never done that before. It was always just left to the individual to sort themselves out. Now, that's fine if you win something, but you're still going to have the dip of, now it's not, this glamorous world. But for those athletes, I fell in the Olympics in London 2012, missed a medal, and I was 20 years old. And there was not one piece of contact afterwards from the biggest moment of your life. So that's where governing bodies can assist and make sure they're supporting people, particularly our young athletes. Older athletes are a bit different. They've been through the mill. I could be all right now because I know how it works, but I didn't know how the game worked at that point. I was just a kid. To see this EAP of sorts, this employee assistance program of sorts that the IOC have set up for athletes is amazing that they've done that. A bit more guidance around, and it doesn't have to be much, it's resources, it's support in that case. I don't expect everyone to have one-to-one counselling after an Olympics, but I think it's an element of showing that you care. Is a big part, especially because athletes in an Olympics give so much to the world at that point. And they've also built up their whole life towards that, and then suddenly your life stops. So there's not much support that comes after, and that's really, really tough.
And you talk about emotional regulation being absolutely crucial for individuals to sustain their mental well-being. The ups and downs, they're just there's not a parallel. There's nothing similar to it, I guess. It's absolutely fascinating hearing your response to that, Jack. We've got a question from Helen, and it's amazing to see so many questions. What I will promise we will do is, if we don't get round to your question, Jack will be able to send you a follow-up email just with a personal response within here. But it's amazing to see the engagement. And again, Jack, thank you so much for just your honesty, openness and authenticity with this. Helen's asked, is there a difference between the pressure we put on ourselves and pressure and expectations that other people put on us, and therefore how we manage them? Now, it'd be really interesting to hear it coming from yourself as an Olympian, but also yourself as an employee within Champion. I suppose there are pressures at all levels. Really keen to hear your thoughts on that, Jack.
The worst pressure and expectation, this is personally, so it's my opinion on this, so it might not relate with some people, it will with others. The worst pressure and expectation has always been internal. I've always expected and demanded more of myself than others would, even when, you had, in our case, you get the media getting involved, or you have to get funding this year or to keep your sponsorship. I was a Nike athlete for 10 years, and if I didn't medal at a championships, I wasn't top 10 in the world, you lose your income, done. No questions asked. So you have the pressures of that, which obviously, influence a lot of your behaviours and your actions. But for me, it was always that internal. It's what I demanded of myself. And within sport, we had that very simple measure of, I know how good I am, and I know how good I'm not, and I know how good everyone else is. We have a time in athletics. It can be the most brutal sport because of it, because you are measured and your results and your value is done on a time. But then on top of that, it's also at the right time. So you could be number one in the world in April, but the Olympics or World Championships, Europeans or Commonwealths are in August. If I'm not world number one then, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. There's my value, done. So for athletes and young athletes, I saw there was another question around young athletes, the education we need to give them around that perspective, that mindset, that actually winning isn't the only success. Being number one in the world isn't the only success, because guess what? We're not all capable of being number one. I wasn't number one in the world. I believed I could be, but facts are I wasn't. So why would I then beat myself up because I was sixth in the world? Fourth, which I would, because it wasn't good enough. Yet that was a whole mindset thing. So there's more education we need to do around sports people, just general anyway, everyone, around perspective, mental awareness, mindset. It's not just mental health, it's mindset. It's how we view things and then how we move forward with them.
And I guess looking at social media at the moment, it would be a completely different field from when you were an elite athlete and an Olympian to what they're experiencing at the moment. And that comparison is one of the main things that is driving increases in self-harm in teenage girls, for example. And I suppose there's almost that comparison of you comparing yourself to everyone else, as you mentioned there, and self-compassion being absolutely crucial and being kind to yourself. Is that something that you'd agree with? And you'd say that self-compassion is probably one of the most important things you've learned?
100%, especially in individual. We're all individuals, right? Even if you're in a team sport, you're an individual athlete. Even if you're working in the workplace, you're an individual person. So you might be part of a team, but you're the one dealing with you, and you're working with your mind the whole time. And some days are just rubbish. And I know people have heard me speak before, I preach around effort. So I don't measure myself on results. They're a result of my effort. So I focus on effort because some days I'm a bit useless. Some days there's financial stress, or there might be physical stress. There might be any stress that we have within our pillars of well-being. I might not have 100% in the tank. So all I can do on that day is give 100% of what's there. It might only be 60%, but that's okay, because that leads to consistency, it leads to acceptance, it leads to a lot more self-compassion and kind of self-talk, rather than this burnout, which I used to have all the time, which was, I only have 60% in the tank, but guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go at 100% and push myself beyond actually what I should be doing on that day. That then leads to me breaking. Either I very rarely broke physically, I was very robust physically, but I burn out mentally. I just couldn't handle that intensity. Instead of managing it and doing the best I could on that day, I demanded I do better than my best, which is a really, it brings me to a saying that really I hate, which people talk about all the time. I just got to be better than I was yesterday. Yeah, but in what? If we look at it as an overall, it's not possible every day. There will be days that you are better than you were yesterday. But if we keep going like that, we're always demanding that we're more than we are. And it's always saying that you are not good enough.
Yeah.
For me, that's brutal. We're never going to be able to sustain that for the long term. So, yeah, there's a few things in there. I'm getting very preachy, and I appreciate we've got lots of questions.
Well, you just hear it come through, and I talk a lot about mental health in the workplace. And for anyone that knows my story, you'll understand why I'm so passionate about it. And you can just hear it in your voice, Jack, and the authenticity, as I mentioned earlier. Ryan has mentioned and just echoed the words that I mentioned around, we're proud and fortunate to have you, Jack. And so I completely echo that. There is another question within there that we'll be able to get to via email, but I'm just going to skip ahead through to Hillary's question. And there's a lot, there'll be many parents on this call, there'll be many people with nephews and nieces that will be concerned about young people's mental health. And I know that you've worked with young minds, for example. Helen's question is on how you taught to deal with the media and pressure as a young athlete. With the social media people can get to direct to athletes, are you advised to manage this? And I'd also be interested in discussing it around the general population and what can be done for young people to manage social media and all of the pressures and social comparisons that go along with that.
Yeah, so I had no training with media. I never had anything, and especially when you get your young athletes, you know, coming off a track 30 seconds after they've run around and they're fatigued or they're emotional, and it might be a high emotion, it might be a negative emotion, and then suddenly a camera's there and we expect them to be able to articulate their thoughts perfectly, and yet they've had no media training. And then but the problem with media training is it then doesn't lead to authenticity. The media thing's a whole different ball game, where we ask people to be authentic, and then when they are, we punish them for it, or they get abused for being authentic. So then we create an environment where athletes and sports people or other people in the media don't feel they can say something without it being taken the wrong way. For what would I advise? Use it as business. Treat it as business. Your social media is business. It's a case of, as an athlete, you are doing it to get sponsorship. I'm not doing it to make friends. I'm not doing it to put my thoughts and feelings out there as such. It is there to sustain me financially and for PR and to push me forward, because sponsors pick you up on social media. Now I'm not in sport, I don't have social media, deleted it all, because I was too busy spending time on there, looking at things that weren't important, the things that I shouldn't value as much as I was at the time, and it just wasn't healthy. So with my athletes, I say, create it like a business page. Put up there about your athletics, put up the facts, leave it at that. So if we can then apply that to other people in terms of, do you need social media? If you need it for business, do it, but do it the right way. There's a lot of education around that, and that's a real stress for people at the moment, having to be in this world and now have social media. It's something that not that long ago we didn't have that stress, so that's an extra one for everyone, not just athletes.
And it's the drip effect, I guess, that it's just that constant drip within here. We've got so many other questions and comments within. Thank you, Leah, Joanne, Aaron, Lara, for all of your comments. Rick, Brian, Claire, Tina, there's so many within. I guess a big one is around, and there's a lot of people that work within wellbeing that are on this event. And even if you work within HR, but you have a wellbeing arm, or even if actually you just want to support the wellbeing of yourself and people around you, one of the biggest things is obsession. And you want to get things right. You care about it so much that you really obsess over the results and obsess over, am I doing the right things? But obsession is dangerous. And I guess that, how did you learn from, and this was one of the questions I'd love to ask to Kate as well, from being really focused? Is there a fine line between focus and obsession within there? And how do you then break off and split off from this is my work and this is what I need to do, through to, okay, now I've gone too far and it's become an obsession, whether it's with dinosaurs, I know you love Jack, all the way through to work? I'd just be really keen on hearing your thoughts of how you distinguish between those things.
Firstly, it's all individual. So it's not a case of everyone should be that balance we talk about. It's not 50-50, right? Some people can go 99% with whatever their work is and 1% on social and be fine. Some people have to mix it up, and that's cool. But for me, it's putting the value not in obsession as such. The value is in consistency.
Yeah.
So that for me then became my measure of how am I going to be the best in the world, because it was also understanding that one good day didn't make me Olympic champion, but one bad day also didn't stop me from being Olympic champion. What was going to lead to high success is the consistency. Turning up, giving what I can, ticking as many boxes as I could consistently. Because I could be a superstar one day, but if I'm useless the rest of the week, the average is really, really low.
Yeah.
So for me, consistency was the measure. And that allowed me then to be able to go and enjoy myself. But it was also then understanding that human part, that personal part, that personal is part of the professional, that, do you know what, I need to go and rest and recover, and I need to go and be social, and maybe I need to go and have a beer, which I would never do when I was young as an athlete first starting out. But then I was like, one beer won't stop me being an Olympic champion. In fact, it might actually help me, because I've gone for one beer with my friends, and that social might give me more than not doing it.
Yeah.
So it's trying to understand the value of things and actually where the benefits might be. It's always, I'm an incredibly obsessive person when it comes to work, when it comes to anything, quite frankly. It's almost a family trait. We are all or nothing people. So being able to change that was really hard for me, but it's something I have to continue to manage and build that awareness. And yeah, for me, it's, am I being consistent? And if I'm not, it tends to be because I've gone too hard one day on something that's led to a dip the next. So consistency is always the measure for me.
And in terms of lessons that people can take away, we're coming to the end of this live session, and thank you so much for all of your comments and questions within here. For relating to workplace health, there seem to be so many parallels between athletes' well-being and Olympians' well-being through to workplace health. What are the main learnings that you could take and you have taken from your career into the field of workplace health?
There's lots. Obviously, I've got lots of my kind of life lessons I talk about on my keynotes. Been very fortunate to do keynotes for a long time. Big part was understanding failure. So being able to take away that fear of failure, change the language. I know language got brought up as a question earlier. Language is one of the most important things that we can change within well-being, within performance, because unfortunately, when we look at performance language, it's always conflict, it's always aggressive. And then we're asking people to be open, authentic, and honest, yet we're using aggressive conflict language all the time. So that's an interesting, but fear of failure, changing failure to learning was a huge one for me. And I still struggle. Being told that I've done something wrong, or if I have done something wrong, my first initial reaction is that of defense, because I don't like it. But in terms of other things, so changing fear of failure to fear of learning, that effort piece is really big for me, that I spoke about earlier. In terms of understanding you're a human being is massive. that again, once I said I was a human being, which for some reason I didn't believe before, strangely, but once I said to myself I was a human being, it gave me permission to have those moments that were human moments of emotion, of feeling, of down days, whatever it might be. That was a real big help. But then just being able to have that communication as well. Communication is so important. So being able to say with your management team, with whoever it is, look, this is how I feel, and that vulnerability piece, right? So being able to communicate and be vulnerable, so that you can actually be authentic and be yourself. There's so many things I could go on for ages and ages, but I'm more than happy if anyone has questions, if you drop me either a message on LinkedIn or on email, or I'll come back to the ones that are on there already. But I'm always open, honest, and happy to help.
Jack, thank you so much. And there's so many things that I've taken away. I know we speak at length about this topic. I've seen your keynote as well, and it blows me away every time. And I thank you, and you've seen it probably in the comments if you've been able to scroll through them, in terms of the amount of people that said thank you for opening up. Whilst you may have done it differently, and I think it's had a huge impact upon the space of not just British athletics, but global athletics and wider society as well. In terms of,
sorry, Harry, can I say before we stop, in terms of, it's a huge thanks to Kate coming on here, because
yes,
she just won Olympic gold, and she'll still be, people know with governing bodies on here, she's still contracted, she still can only say so much and so on, yet we got complete 100% honesty and openness around Tokyo and her experiences. And I know Kate very well, and there were parts in there that I didn't know. So amazing that we could get a current athlete here as well.
It was incredible to hear her open up about taking those breaks that are much needed for any athlete, and then to go on to win gold at Tokyo is just quite inspirational. Now, in terms of rounding up, there's so much that I've taken away, and I've just got pages and pages of notes here that I've used for my own learning as much as anything. So I feel spoiled to be in this seat right now. But the things that I've really taken away from yourself, Jack, is focusing on the human being. With athletics, a happy human is a fast human in your world, but in the workplace, it's exactly the same. The well-being is really the foundation of high performance. And if we're wanting people to perform at their peak, we need to focus on their well-being. The other element is around using and reframing failure to learning. And there's a phrase that I regularly use of you either win or you learn. And failure is a good thing. If we don't fail, then we're not learning at the speed that we want to. I think the key thing is just not to repeat the same mistakes again and again and again. And the final element is then giving permission. Jack, I completely agree with you on that. And it's something that I'm very conscious of. To be a leader that can be vulnerable at times, we all need to show our emotions as senior leaders within organizations. Now, in terms of further insights, we've also developed, and this was before the Olympics, but it's been tweaked, an Olympians Guide to Workplace Health. This features Kate Frenchin and has quotes and sharing her expertise. And as Jack said, a massive thank you to her. It also features Jack and other Olympians within here. You can download it by just going through to the Insights page on Champion Health's website, and you can access it there. And it's freely available just for you to be able to use within your organization. We'll send through a recording of this live session because I'm sure you may want to share it with people around you. There are so many golden nuggets that I've taken from this, and there are more sessions coming very soon. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what you would like to focus on next. And if you enjoyed the session, please like, share, comment on our LinkedIn pages. I'd love to connect with you if we're not already on LinkedIn, and same with Jack as well. Really, the mission at Champion is to make healthier easier for everyone. And hopefully we've been able to do that with sharing the best in the business with Jack and Kate. As Jack mentioned, a huge thank you to Kate. Her schedule is just absolutely crazy at the moment with media duties and everything else. And she's done it completely free of charge as well, just to be able to share her insights into what it was like at Tokyo 2020 as well. Have a great day all, and I look forward to seeing you at the next event. Take care.